PlayStation VR2 or Oculus Quest 2. I mean, Meta Quest 2. Why did they have to change the name? That's the question we're going to answer in this video today. Which one of these headsets should you buy? We're going to do that by going through a number of categories to see which one of these headsets comes out on top. First, we're going to start off with the specs of each unit, and I want to tell you right off the bat, the PlayStation VR2 is an absolute beast when it comes to specs. It has a 4K HDR OLED display, meaning that each eye is looking at a lens with a resolution of 2000 by 2040, with panel refresh rates of 90 Hz and 120 Hz, with a 110 degree field of view. But then we get to the Oculus Quest 2. But then we get to the Meta Quest 2, and it has an LCD display with a resolution of 832 by 920 per eye, with refresh rates of 60, 72, and 90 Hz. And playing with both of these headsets back to back, let me tell you, you can really tell that the PlayStation VR2 is more impressive, especially with those higher resolution panels. It really brings out the detail and color in games like Horizon Call of the Mountain and a game called Kayak VR Mirage, which just looks absolutely stunning through that display. It also helps that the PSVR2 is powered by the PlayStation 5, which is an absolute beast in terms of horsepower, making games like Star Wars Tales from the Galaxy's Edge look absolutely stunning in comparison to the Meta Quest 2 version. Let me tell you, it looks like jumping from a Wii game to a PS3 game, if that comparison makes sense. Obviously, games look so much better on PlayStation VR2 because of the PS5's specs on its own. And even though games don't look as good on Meta Quest 2, they still look great for being a portable, all-in-one VR headset. So credit where credit is due. I'm telling you though, it's hard to go back to some games on Meta Quest 2 when they look so much better on PSVR 2. Even then, Meta Quest 2 can be plugged into PC, so you can play Oculus Rift games as well as Steam games like Half-Life Alyx. So that can be an advantage if someone has a really good PC that's VR ready. However, I still gotta give the specs category to PlayStation VR 2, because even if you're playing a stunning looking VR game on a Meta Quest 2, I guarantee you that game would look much better being displayed on the PSVR 2 because of those beautiful OLED displays. It's just no contest. PSVR 2 is the clear winner here when it comes to specs. But now let's get to comfort, because if I'm going to be playing VR games for hours on end, the headset I'm wearing better be comfortable. And I'm going to do that thing again where I hold both headsets, because I'm going to tell you one thing is clearly heavier than the other, and that is the Oculus Quest 2. I'm doing it again! Meta Quest 2. And it makes sense, right? Because it's an all-in-one portable device. There's clearly a lot of horsepower in this thing right here, but the PSVR 2, it doesn't need to have any horsepower in it. It's mainly a device to display VR games, so therefore it feels lighter and it disperses the weight better through this headband, because let me tell you, I hate the straps on these things. They're just really flimsy, and I always feel like I have to adjust the tightness on this thing after some time playing. There's accessories available where you can swap this out with a better band, but you know what's better than buying a better headband for a VR headset? Buying a headset that has one already, and that's where we're talking about PSVR 2. This headset is already very comfortable, thanks mainly to this big headband right here. This button right here, you hold it down, it already stretches out like this. It also has a dial too, so you can tighten it when it goes on your head. This part also adjusts very well too, so it's really just a comfortable headset overall. It stays on your head very well. There's no need to adjust it during playing because it just sticks on perfectly. So there's a very clear winner in this category already. However, I just want to pour some more salt onto the Quest 2's wound, because you see this little flap right here? This prevents any light coming in from this opening, which is a problem I have all the time on the Quest 2, so yep, PSVR takes the comfort category. But as for ease of setup, here's where things could get different. Now, when you set up your PSVR 2 for the first time, it is kind of a process, maybe one that takes about 15 minutes max, but it's a process nonetheless. It guides you through getting your headset ready, how to use that headband, how to adjust your eyes so it's looking through the screen properly. It's also reading the room and everything, so it knows how much space is available to work with, so it is a bit of a process. However, it is better than the first PlayStation VR in that it doesn't need a PlayStation camera or all this other stuff in order to get the sensors working properly. Nope, it's just one USB-C cable, plug it into your PS5, there you go. However, I gotta give credit where credit is due to the Quest 2. That was kind of a rhyme. As much of a pain as it is to get those straps working, it's still a much easier and quicker setup than PlayStation VR 2. It reads the room already, you can walk around the room, scan it, there's no need to plug it into anything except a PC if you have that option, but if you don't have that option, that's okay too, because it's so easy to put on the headset, get it set up, link your Facebook account. I guess you need a Facebook account, that's a bummer, but still, the Quest 2 is really easy to set up, so that's why Quest 2 takes this category for ease of setup. But let's move on to Immersion. Now, I already talked about the specs of each machine, so you can probably guess who's gonna take this as well. PlayStation VR2, along with having a beautiful 4K OLED display, also has a wide field of view at 110 degrees, whereas the Quest 2 only has 89. Both headsets still look good, but PSVR 2 is definitely winning in terms of how the games look. The lighting is very dynamic in games like Call of the Mountain, and the colors are just so deep and saturated, it looks extremely good, and that 90 to 120 Hz refresh rate makes things smooth as butter. There's also a neat eye tracking feature built into the headset, which the only game I have that utilizes it is Horizon, and it's only really used for selecting items on the menu quicker, so I haven't really used it in any gameplay experience, but my first impressions are that it's kind of a gimmick, one that works pretty well for the menus, but I need to see how it works in games like Firewall Ultra, for instance. The only complaint I really have is this cable right here. Like, you'll always feel it on you, no matter what you're playing, or no matter where you place it. That cable will always be there, so that's kind of a bummer, but it's a necessary evil. It's also roughly 14.5 feet long, which is a good length, but if you have a really big living room, and I mean you're like a 1%er, you got this massive living room, that might be an issue. You might have to stand closer to the TV. You won't be able to go as far away from the PlayStation 5 as you want, but if you have a living room that big, I'm sorry, you don't have problems. I've been playing in my office, which is a bit of a smaller space, but it still worked really well for me. The only time my immersion was kind of broken was when I looked straight up at the ceiling a couple of times, and the game couldn't detect my room anymore, but that was a rare occurrence, and I could have had that experience with Quest 2 at some point. I don't know, I've had my Quest 2 for quite a while, so I don't recall any particular moment like that, but for what it's worth, the Quest 2 does have the advantage of not needing a cable unless you're playing a PC game, so you can take this bad boy anywhere. It doesn't need to be tethered to anything. And then of course there's the audio. This headset right here has a stereo jack in the back, so you can plug in any headset you want with it, including the default earbuds right here. These earbuds actually sound really good too. They really bring out the 3D audio in the games, and it actually forms perfectly behind the headset. Hopefully I can show you it right here. Ah, yes. And there's even a hole you can plug it into right here, so it blends in perfectly. But if you don't want to use earbuds, you can take those out and put in the Pulse 3D wireless headset if you have one, and it fits around the headset perfectly. The Quest 2 also has a headphone jack, so you can plug in a headphone there, but I oddly like the speakers that are on the headset, which basically projects the sound into your ears. It lets me hear everything around me in case anyone's calling my name or something, and they also sound really loud too, so that's an added benefit. But you know, I still have to give PSVR 2 the edge here. It has that advantage of having the best specs around, along with a better field of view, but it really makes a huge difference in immersion. I really felt like I was climbing those mountains in Call of the Mountain, you know? I've also never seen a screen as crystal clear as the one on PSVR 2. Everything just looks so nice with that high resolution per eye, and that's why I have to give this win to PlayStation VR 2 once again. Now let's talk about the controls, and right here I have the Sense controllers for the PlayStation VR 2. I really like these controls. The triggers feel super nice, the buttons feel nice as well as the control sticks, which are clickable. I really like these controllers, however, I don't know if I like them as much as the MetaQuest 2's touch controllers. For one, these have really short battery life, about 3 hours until I hit the low battery warning, so maybe about 4 hours if I'm being generous. I have to charge these in between sessions. Also, I keep hitting them together a lot. That might sound like a skill issue, but I don't really have that problem with the MetaQuest 2. I'm about to drop them. No, I'm not, because these circles are massive. Still, really like these controllers. However, if I had to choose between the two, I have to go with the MetaQuest 2's touch controllers. I don't know exactly what it is about them that makes them better. Oh, I know, they fit into my gargantuan hands way better. The PSVR 2 controllers still work well, but I like the way these feel more, and that might also be just based on personal preference because my hands are pretty big. However, it's harder to hit these together while I'm playing a VR game, so that also gets points there, but the big points comes from the battery life. I don't know what Sony has against good battery life, but like I said, the PSVR2 controllers don't last a long time, and it's probably because they have haptic feedback, which I honestly barely even noticed, if at all. These run on one AA battery each, and let me tell you, AA batteries are currently underrated. I still use them for my Xbox controller. They last a very long time. Same goes for these. I don't remember exactly how many times I've had to change them in my 2 or so years owning a MetaQuest 2, maybe once or twice. That's how long they last. And I looked it up, apparently they last about 30 to 50 hours, which is quite a big range, but I believe it. These things last a very long time, so gotta give the controls to MetaQuest 2. Now we're getting to the game libraries, and I know MetaQuest 2 has a very unfair advantage being out longer than the PSVR 2, but this is still a very important deciding factor when considering which VR headset to get. Now Quest 2's library, we should all know by now, is massive. Not just with what you can buy on the Oculus store or Meta store. Is that even what it's called now anymore? I don't know. Oculus is a way cooler name than Meta. Anyway, there's a ton of games you can get through the in-game store, many of which are free too. So when you pick up a MetaQuest 2, you'll be able to download a couple of free games like Echo VR. I downloaded an Anne Frank museum tour, which is a bit depressing, but it's there. And not only that, if you do have a PC, you can get a bunch of games on Steam, so that way you can play even more games that aren't available on MetaQuest 2, or the better looking versions of games that are available on MetaQuest 2, like Moss, for example. And not only that, but Quest 1 games are compatible with Quest 2. So if you owned the very first Oculus Quest, when they were called Oculus back then, you can play those games on MetaQuest 2. Which brings me to the big flaw with PlayStation VR 2, and that there is no backwards compatibility with PlayStation VR 1 games, which I guess is understandable. The technology on PSVR 2 is much different than PSVR 1, but still, it's a huge bummer that there's a massive library of PSVR 1 games that are simply unplayable now on PSVR 2. There are some games, thankfully, that are getting PSVR 2 patches, like After the Fall, Job Simulator, but sadly, none of them are Astrobot Rescue Mission. Where is that, Sony? I haven't played that on PSVR 1. I am dying to play it on PSVR 2. So there is still hope that we will see more PSVR 1 games make their way over to 2. But man, I am concerned because Sony does not seem to be a huge fan of backwards compatibility these days, especially because Moss, the first game that originally first came out on PSVR 1, does not have a free upgrade for PSVR 2. Instead, you have to buy the game again through the Moss Book 1 and Book 2 collection. That's a very anti-consumer move, if you ask me. I don't know if that was Sony's decision or what, but it's just a huge bummer to see. Even then, the library of PlayStation VR 2 games is going to be growing in the next few months. We got more games coming, especially we got free updates coming for games like Resident Evil Village. I don't doubt the PSVR 2's library is going to grow exponentially within the next year or so, but if you're looking for a vast library of games to play right now, you're gonna have to look at the Quest 2. Because again, not only do you have the catalog of games available through the in-game store, you also have a bunch of PC games, assuming you have a PC that runs VR games to begin with. So, Quest 2, better game library, at least right now. Big asterisk there. Finally, we need to discuss the value of each headset. Not just the price, but the value, because let's be real. Just because something is more expensive does not automatically mean it's better. Because technically the PSVR 2 is better, but when we consider things that the Quest 2 offers that the PSVR 2 does not, that's where the discussion gets a bit shaky. For one, PSVR 2 costs $550 US, and that's not including a game. If you want to get Horizon Call of the Mountain bundled in with it, that's another $50. So already you're spending $600 on the headset. But what if you don't have a PlayStation 5? Well, then your price goes up to $1,100, or $1,000 if you go for the cheaper digital edition, which nobody wants. That is a huge amount of money if you don't already own a PlayStation 5. So in that sense, the PSVR 2 is more valuable for PlayStation 5 owners who've already had the system to begin with. But what if you're trying to pick your very first VR headset? Well, here's the thing. I do see PlayStation VR 2 having value to VR enthusiasts, if you will, the people who demand the greatest when it comes to virtual reality. And if that's the case, you probably already have a PC that is more than capable of handling the best looking VR games. So why would you get anything else but a Meta Quest 2 to run those games through PC? After all, the Meta Quest 2 starts at $400 US, which is a bummer because they used to be $300. They recently increased the price. But given the fact that you can just buy the headset and you already can download games to that headset, that's a lot of bang for your buck, man. Not only that, but you can also customize your experience with apps like SideQuest. You just plug in your Quest 2 to your PC and you can download the SideQuest app. You can customize the recording sizes of your videos. You can customize the refresh rate of your lenses. You can even play with graphics settings on certain games. There's just a lot of options you get, a lot of freedom you get with the Meta Quest 2. There's even apps like YouTube VR, big screen mode. The most similar app PlayStation VR2 has is called Cinematic Mode, which basically lets you play your PS5 and PS4 games through a giant screen that's placed in front of you virtually. It's like you're playing on a massive television. So that's a really cool feature that I've enjoyed from what I've played of it, but I'm really here to play the VR games. I wouldn't buy a VR headset just to only play non-VR games on a massive virtual screen. I want to have those virtual experiences, and I gotta say, Meta Quest 2 has that value right now. The value of the PSVR 2 is going to increase down the road, that you can be sure of. But right now, it's just not there yet. There's games coming out for it soon, yes, but right now, the Quest 2, you can do a lot more with it. You can play a lot more games with it, despite it being technologically inferior to the PSVR 2. And I gotta say, for the money, you're really getting a lot with Meta Quest 2. And that brings us to the final verdict. Which one of these headsets should you buy? And out of all the categories we've listed, PlayStation VR 2 has taken the specs, the comfort, and the immersion, but Quest 2 takes the ease of setup, the controls, the library of games, for now at least, and the value. So that means it is the winner of this showdown. If you're looking for a VR headset to get right now, maybe this is your first time getting into VR, the Meta Quest 2 is your best option right now. Because even though I'll admit, I'm really enjoying this PSVR 2. It's a really impressive piece of technology, and if a game is coming out on it that's also coming out on a Meta Quest 2, I'm gonna play it on PlayStation VR 2. Of course I am. The graphics just look so much better. The resolution of the screen is insane. It just looks really good. However, I can't say I recommend it to everybody right now. In general, the Meta Quest 2 is pretty much the best all-around VR device, and especially when you plug it into the PC, you can get those visually impressive games if you're not satisfied with how they look on the standalone Quest itself. So even though I like the PSVR 2 a lot, I still appreciate this bad boy for what it can do and at the cost that it comes with, even though I bought it before the price increase, so lucky me, I guess. In the end, despite Meta Quest 2 winning this battle, I'm still pretty excited for the future of PlayStation VR 2, albeit cautiously optimistic. I really think that PlayStation needs to lower the price of this device and increase that library of games. Of course they're going to increase their library of games, but include way more PlayStation VR 1 games in that catalog. It's a huge bummer that it's not backwards compatible, but it is what it is right now. Hopefully we'll get more PlayStation VR 2 patches for those PSVR 1 games. So I hope Sony increases the value of the PlayStation VR 2 in the next year or so. And who knows, maybe we'll revisit this topic later and see if Meta Quest 2 still comes out on top. If it does, props to PlayStation. If not, props to Meta. Maybe Meta Quest 3 will be out soon. Who knows?